Okay, we got some fun stuff to do today. We're going to get straight into a third programming language of the quarter today. But before we get into that, I want to start with another example. We did some examples with layout on Monday and Wednesday, and I want to do another example that might be a little bit more, a little bit closer to what you might expect for layout. So let's go to lectures here, and we're going to do a blog. I have sort of the bare bones HTML code here. We don't have any CSS applied to it yet, but I'll show you guys what we want to do with this. It's going to look something like this. We're going to have like a banner across the top that's got this nice little beer whatever image, and we've got these links over here that are going to be like the navigation links spread across the top. The rest of the page we're going to be doing some more with later on, but I want to start with some layout stuff to just sort of refresh that in our minds. Resize that. Okay, oops. Let's see, then we want to uncomment that. Okay, I'm gonna start with just the basic body font style, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to get the banner, the image banner there. And I can show you that we have images here. There's the header image is right there. That's the one that we want. That's the one that we want across the back, across the top here. So we have a header up here that's the H1. Let's look at the HTML. We have header tag. We have H1. We have a nav, and inside of that we have a UL, which is a list of links, and then we've got a paragraph down here, and then the close of the header, and then after that is the main section. So what we want to do is we want to add this image in there. We don't even have the image there. Why not? Anybody know why we don't have it there? Well, so we're not going to add the image to the HTML, actually. So we have a header up here, a text header that provides the, actually let's go take a look at the image here so we can just see what the image is. It's this. It's got this text on it. The image has the text on it, but we also want to retain the beer and blog actual text in the document. So that like a search engine or something can like find the actual title of the document. So how do we go about having this image and also having the text on screen, even though the text is actually rendered into this image? So this is a little bit of a challenge, and basically what I'm going to teach you guys is a technique. It's called image replacement. And this will allow us to replace the header with an image so that a search engine, when they visit the page, they see the text, B-E-E-R-A-N-D-B-L-O-G, but when we view the page in the document, in the browser, we see this stylized graphical rendering in the image. And the way that we can do that is we can replace it with a background image. We can replace something somewhere in the header here with a background image. We can kind of experiment with where we want to put it exactly. And then we can actually just get rid of this H1. We can just like move it off screen so that it's not visible. A common thing to do that is, I can just do that right now. I can just say H1, position absolute, left, negative. This is a common way of making this disappear off screen. I'm going to give it a left, absolute position to the left side, with respect to the left side of the page, negative really, really far. Actually, so I forget to mirror the image for you guys. Negative really, really far off to this side of the page. And this is a common practice. This is sort of a best practice with regards to like accessibility. You want the text, beer, and blog to stay in the document so that anything that's rendering this can actually read that. If somebody's visiting this page with an RL browser, a browser that reads the text to them, they can still read this text. But those of us who can actually see the image, we get the benefit of actually seeing the image. So that's what I've done. I've just removed this header from the screen. I've positioned it absolutely, and if we could see it, it would be like way off to the left side of the page. So it's basically gone. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to put a background image. So yeah.
Why is it that the white space on top disappears
When I just did that,
yeah, that was in the visible setup and it goes down. So why does the white space disappear?
so are you talking about the white space above beer and blog and below beer and blog? When you remove it like this, everything else moves up. Yeah. So why does everything else move up? Because so when we position something absolutely, it gets removed from the normal document flow, and everything else reflows. Everything else just sort of comes up to take its place. So something that's absolutely positioned, we take it out of the normal document and we move it around some arbitrary sort of pixel location, some arbitrary coordinates on screen, and it can overlap things. And as a result of removing it from the normal document flow, everything else moves up to take its place. Good question. Okay, so what we want is we want this list to be somewhere up in the header here, and we want the background image, the image to show up. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a background image on, why don't we do it on, let's do it on header. Background image on the header tag. Header, background image, URL images/header.jpg. Okay, now we have this background image showing up. Obviously not all of it is showing up here. How would we make all of it show up on screen? Yeah, we're going to have to actually explicitly set a height for this element so that it extends to the full height of this background image. So let's go inspect this image here. I can see that it's 1300 by 200 pixels. I'm going to set the height of the header then to be 200 pixels. Okay. So that's done, and we basically, in two very small steps, we have added the image and we've removed the text header off to the left side of the page so that it's no longer actually visible on screen. But so that any like automated system that's analyzing this page still sees that text, which would be very difficult to. It would be very difficult for an automated system like Google to pick out the type in this image. Okay, let's do stuff with this stuff here. We want that to be over here in the bottom right over here, sort of spread across the bottom there. And that's, maybe an M from the bottom and like half an M from the right or something with some spacing in between. I don't know what we can figure out exactly where we want to put it. Any ideas how we go about putting this stuff down there, making everything appear next to each other? Using float, so that's one approach that we can use, and that's a good approach. What's another approach that we can use? Sorry, say it again. Right, we actually for these we'd probably want to use absolute position, so we can put them in specific locations. Relative position, actually, so the thing I didn't mention about relative position is if you set relative position on an element and use top, left, bottom, or right to position it, then it moves with respect to where it was, and that sort of hole, if you can imagine like a cookie cutter hole of that element on screen, it just stays there. So like there's a gap where that element was. It's not removed from the normal document flow. what I think you meant was position absolute, which removes the element from the document flow and allows us to just position it anywhere on screen. Did I see a hand almost going up there?
Were you talking about stacking the links?
From left to right. How would you put them from left to right?
You mean oriented to the left side of the screen?
No, I mean just sort of like put them side by side like this, as opposed to stacked like this. I think I heard somebody else say another solution over here. Display inline, display inline. So if we use display inline, then all of a sudden these things just become text on a normal line of inside of a block level container, and they'll wrap and they'll just sort of, I've transformed them from a block element into just plain stuff that lives on a line.
So I was gonna say something like,
In a what?
well, you had it as a bulletin list,
Mm-hmm.
but if you put it in a paragraph, it goes up.
Right. Yeah. So if we were to change the element here from a UL with LIs inside of it to a paragraph, then the rendering would look different on screen. But is that something we'd want to do? Would we want to change the type of element that that we've used to represent these things? I mean, so semantically, like this is a group of links, right? So semantically, it's a list. That's basically what it is, right? So the choice of what tag we use should not be determined by how it looks on screen, but how it makes the most sense semantically in the document. So I think that we should, a UL is really good for a list of links. I mean, it's a list. It's not necessarily in any inherent order. That's really perfect for a list of links. I wouldn't want to change this to any different type of element, just to alter its appearance. Because altering its appearance is what we do in CSS. So of the couple of things that were mentioned, float and display inline and position absolute, I'm going to choose display inline because we haven't really done much with that yet. And I'm going to show you how easy it can be to do stuff with display inline. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to make the unordered list have a background color so that we can see it. Background color orange. If you haven't noticed, this is one of my favorite layout techniques to just attach a background color to something so that you can see the exact dimensions of the width and height plus padding. If you do border, some people like to attach a border instead. And in fact, in your lab, that's the technique shown in the lab is to put a border around something. The problem with that is it adds dimensions, whereas if you just add a background color, you can see the exact dimensions of where it is without adding any pixels on the left or right, top and bottom. Okay, so we can see the exact footprint of this. I want to make the list items now be display inline, so I'm going to say UL-LI. Actually, I'll say nav LI, just so that I differentiate this from any other list items on the page. Because there are several other list items on the page. There's the navigation list, there's this list of news items, list of chapters, and so on. So I want to specifically target the one inside the nav. So nav LI display inline. Excellent. Okay, so now they're just on a line of text. They're just like plain old text elements sitting right next to each other. So let's take a look at what we see. We don't really see much space in between these things. In fact, these icons are pretty much like right next to each other. And then we do see some space over here. What do you think the space over here is? Yes, the bullets disappeared. That's sort of a side effect of setting display inline. You can explicitly set list style type to be none on them if you want. But I think pretty much every browser by default removes the bullets as soon as you set display inline. What do you think the space is over here? Yeah, well actually it's actually padding of the list. So one of the default attributes of a list, you can see down here is that it's got this indentation inside of there, and we can, if we inspect this list, let's click on the UL, or if we hover over the UL, we can see that, so margin is rendered in yellow in Firebug. The width and height, the actual content area, is rendered in cyan. And the purple area is padding, so P for padding. So if we inspect this one, we can see that it has padding to the left there. So if we remove that padding, let's see, padding left. Actually, I'm just going to say padding 0. That removes that. Okay. Let's pull this up a little bit. So now I want to put it down to the bottom right instead of the top left. Any ideas about how I might accomplish that? Try to go for the easiest way possible. Remember that these are now inline elements. They're just, they exist on a line. If we resize the page, they just wrap like normal text. So if we resize it small enough, they'll just wrap, just like normal text. Any ideas about how we could, okay, well, so like first, let's move it to the right. Text align. Text align is how we get inline content, the text inside of a paragraph, for example, to go right aligned or left aligned or center aligned or justified. So why don't we say in the UL, I want the text alignment to be right. Bing. So now we've moved it all to the right. Okay, the bottom is going to be a little bit trickier maybe, but probably not like too tricky. How do we space it down? What was that? Sorry, one more time. Vertical align? Okay, vertical align. What does vertical align do? It aligns stuff vertically, as the name suggests, but specifically like with respect to what? Why is it not really useful for this situation? Let's go ahead and set vertical align. Sorry, say it again. Well, no. So vertical align doesn't turn text to make it like go vertically. Specifically, it affects the relative positioning of, not relative positioning, but like the positioning of an image on the line of text. So this is a line of text here, and if I want to adjust the images inside of that, I can say nav li image vertical align bottom. That might not really have much of a noticeable difference, but if I refresh, yeah. So now that moved those down to the bottom of the line of text. So that's not really something that we want to use. It's not going to be super useful. So what can we use? How do we add additional space above this? What's that? Padding on the top? Yeah, we can do padding. I would probably prefer to do margin because margin is like outside of the element and padding is inside of the element. So maybe we can do some padding. Margin. Margin top 1em. So here we're seeing a quirk of CSS. I've added a top margin to this, and if I hover over this, I can see that it has a top margin. Actually, by default, it had a top margin, so what I just added was useless. It has a top and bottom margin, but it's not being spaced from the top of the thing. Why not? Well, this is sort of a quirk. Margins actually bleed out of its containing element. So I think you're actually right. We are going to have to use padding for this. So let's say padding top. If we say padding top 1em, then if we hover over it now, we've still got the margins because those are there by default, but the padding has been added there at the top. So that's another thing that we could use. I don't know, like, so I just don't like adding that color there for some reason. So maybe like, maybe we can actually absolutely position this. How about that? So we can say position absolute, bottom 0, and then in order for that to work, in order for it to go to the bottom of the header, what do we have to do to header? In order for header to be its containing element, so that this element goes is positioned with respect to the header, then what do? We don't have to move it. We have to set position on it so that it becomes a containing element for anything inside of it that's absolutely positioned. What are the other two useful position properties? Position absolute, relative. So if we say position relative, then this header becomes the new bounding box for anything absolutely positioned inside of it. So if I say bottom 0, it goes to the bottom of the header. If I forget about this, it's going to go to the bottom of the screen or the bottom of the page or something. Now if I say position relative, it becomes a new container for anything inside of it. Whoops. So let's see. Nav UL. That's what I want. Did I delete that nav? I guess. Okay. So now this is positioned with respect to the bottom. Actually, so what we've just done is we've made it unnecessary to do text align right. I'm not sure why that's, because that has margin. Okay, so let's remove the margin 0. Okay, so that's in the bottom right. Now why don't we go ahead and add some of that spacing back, and we can add some spacing between these inline elements here. Why don't we say, so these LIs we can now add margin left 0.5 ems, margin right 0.5 ems. Let's give them a background color. I think it's white, right? Or like yeah, it's whitish. Background color white. Okay, let's see what that did. So left and right margin. Okay, we spaced them apart a little bit. We can see the orange background now. Let's move them up a little bit. We need to move them up, and we need to move them to the left a little bit, maybe. Yeah, let's move them up, maybe. So margin bottom 1em. I'll just delete that. Move it back up. Okay, that's looking good. Closer. So there's additional white space around these things. How would we accomplish the additional white space? Right now it's really tight to the text. How would we expand the white space? Say it again. Border. Yeah, we can add border, or we can just adjust the padding. I would probably adjust the padding. Let's do padding. We'll say 1/2 an em on the top and 1/4 of an em on the sides. This is a shortcut that I'm using here. If you specify a single property, it sets it on all 4. If you specify 2, the first one is top bottom and the second one is left right. So I'm using that shortcut there. Okay, that's looking good. We might need to move it up a little more, up in it a little more, so maybe 2 ems on the bottom. Okay, that's looking good. And maybe margin right of 1/2 an M. Okay, that's pretty good. That's getting pretty close. Then let's see. So how would we get the rounded corners? The rounded corners is probably the last thing we need to do for that. It was in the slides. I think it's let's see. Oh, border radius is what it is. Let's see. Border radius maybe 1/4 of an M. Oops, refreshing the wrong one. It's a little too little. Let's do it 1/2 an M. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. It's not quite perfect, but excellent. Okay, that's darn close. The last thing I want to do is after we get rid of this orange background color there, so that we don't see that anymore. The last thing I need to do is this is also part of the header, and you can see that because it's up here. So how would we make this go down beneath that? Actually, so this is sort of a consequence of what we've done. The fact that we have decided to use absolute positioning for these has removed them from the normal document flow, so there's nothing in before this inspired by whatever to move it down. Normally what I would be able to do is I would be able to say, okay, so this UL pretty much takes up like this entire space here, and then I can just space this away from the bottom of the UL. In fact, I'm kind of tempted to do that now. Actually, I'm gonna undo what we just did. No more position absolute, no more bottom right. Let's do like padding top. Maybe one more M. Okay, let's turn the background color back on. And okay, so that's taking up a lot of space there. Padding top 9 M's, text align right, padding bottom 2 M's maybe. Okay, so that's taking up roughly the space that we need. So as a result, this can't really see it there, but this is now pushed down beneath. This paragraph is now pushed down beneath. Why are we not seeing it now? So this is overlapping with the About Root Beer blog. Why is that? So remember that we explicitly set a height on the header, and the header, this text is inside the header. So the fact that we've restricted the header to a particular height means that this is bleeding over, this based off of thing is bleeding over. So we're going to have to adjust the height of the header. Maybe we'll make this 250 pixels instead, and that moves everything down. But now we're getting this repeated. So how do we, the background image is repeating down at the bottom, so how do we undo that? Background, repeat, none. Oops, no repeat is, sorry, no repeat. Excellent, okay. So that's pretty good. We explored a couple of different ways that we can space things apart. Okay, now we're going to move on to some new content for today. Our third programming language this quarter, called PHP. First, a little bit about URLs. So we mentioned that when you request a URL from a server, you're actually your browser is making a request to the computer at this location. It's requesting. It's saying, okay, inside of the folder called CSE190M, give me the file called quote.php. And the server just says, okay, I'm going to go look for that file. Does that file exist? Yes, it does. Do you have permission to read it? Yes, you do. Okay, I'm just going to spit it out, and I just send you the entire contents of the file, and you do whatever you need to with it. Some URLs, up until now, we've seen quote.html or quote.css or whatever. Some files are actually programs that get run on the server before their output is sent to you. And that's the case of a PHP program. A PHP program is a script. It gets executed, and its result is sent to the browser. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So this is a live example, I believe. If we go to quote.php, it's broken. But server-side web programming can be accomplished using several different programming languages. We're going to be using PHP. You could use Ruby, you could use C#, you could use Java, you could use any programming language you want, any frameworks you want. For pretty much every programming language there is a server-side, the ability to host web pages and write server-side scripts using that programming language. Each framework has its pros and cons. Each language has its pros and cons. Why are we choosing PHP? Well, it's somewhat arbitrary. We have to choose something to teach you how to learn, to teach you server-side web programming, but it's also just generally a good choice. It's free and open source. That means we don't have to pay money to use it. It's very well documented. It's very well supported. It's ubiquitous on web servers. So it's really, the bar for entry here is really, really low. PHP is kind of quirky sometimes. It's been developed over the course of 15 years or so, so it's a little bit hairy in spots. But overall, it's a great choice. Facebook writes all of their server-side code in PHP and MySQL. Not everybody would make that choice. Some would question that choice, but it's possible to do a really high-end server using PHP. Okay, PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. That is a recursive acronym. It's a server-side programming language. It's used to make web pages dynamic. We're dynamically generating HTML code that gets sent to the browser. This is the life cycle of a web request. You type in a URL in your browser. The browser contacts the host, example.com, says, give me hello.php. The web server says, oh, that's a PHP file. I can't just give it to you right away. I'm going to have to execute it first. So I'm going to run it through a compiler or interpreter thing. And it's going to generate some output. The output is HTML code, or most of the cases it's HTML code. And that HTML code is just going to get sent to the browser, and the browser is just going to render it like HTML. So the output of our PHP script is going to be HTML code. Right. So basic PHP script. Hello world. Let's do that. Let's hello.php. So I'm just going to do a basic PHP script. A PHP script always begins with this left angle bracket question mark PHP and ends with this question mark right angle bracket. So everything in between this is PHP code. This is PHP code. Everything outside is not PHP code. So this inside of it is PHP code. And so there's a print statement in PHP that says, just output this stuff. So I can say hello world. Semicolon. hello.php. So, hello world, not PHP code. This is the output that we see. So, hello world, not PHP code. The print statement output this, and then the stuff that was outside of the PHP block just got sent to the browser. So anything that's outside of a PHP block just gets sent without being modified. Okay. Viewing PHP output, it's very important that you view PHP code on a web server, through a web server. You won't be able to, once we start coding in PHP, you won't be able to go like to your browser and go File, Open File to view your PHP code because your browser doesn't have any kind of built-in interpreter for PHP code. You have to upload it to a web server, make the request to the web server runs the PHP code and sends the results back to you. If you just do File Open, you're sort of shortcutting the server. You're not going through the server, and the server has to execute the HTML code. So if I try to open a, if I open lecture 6, this hello.php just by doing File Open, actually Firefox is going to say, well, do you want to download this file? I don't know what you want me to do with this file because I don't know how to interpret it. Some other browsers will just show you the source code, the PHP source code, the original PHP source code. So it'll just display this in the browser because it doesn't know what to do with it. So we don't want that. In order to view your code, you're going to have to upload it to the server. Type in webster.cs.washington.edu/your/udemy/the name of the file. Okay, basic syntax. We have the print statement. We have inside print statements, escaped characters are just like in Java. So you can print with double quotes or with single quotes. And if you start with double quotes and you have to use double quotes inside of it, then you just backslash them. Same thing with if you have to use a single quote inside of a single quoted string. You can have line breaks in a string. That's very useful sometimes, so that we've just got a break in the middle of that one. \n, just like in Java, is shortcut for a new line character. So if I add some new line characters here, and we go and refresh, we don't see any difference. Why don't we see any difference? We don't see any difference here. We do see a difference here. Why is that? It outputs it as HTML, or rather the browser is interpreting this as HTML code. Even though we don't have any tags in here, it's interpreting it as HTML. And according to the rules of HTML, white space is collapsed. So even though we added new line characters to our output, the browser is rendering them all as if they're just plain HTML text. Arithmetic operators, pretty much just the same as in Java. You've got addition, multiplication stuff, increment, decrement, plus equals, minus equals, all that stuff. The only major difference between Java and PHP in terms of operators is that in PHP, the concatenation operator is a dot, whereas in Java, it's a plus. So if you want to put two strings together in PHP, you have to use a dot operator instead of a plus operator. Many operators auto-convert types, so if you try to say 5, the number 5 plus quote 7, PHP will automatically convert this quote 7 to the number 7 and do mathematical addition, because of the fact that we're using the plus sign. Variables. So you can just declare variables however you want. They all begin with dollar signs. And the same rules for like variable names apply as in Java. So oftentimes people put underscores between words. They can be strings, they can be numbers, they can be expressions, they can be Boolean values. PHP is a loosely typed language, so there are no type declarations in PHP. You don't say int $age equals 16 or string $username equals in part level 78. You just declare the variable, and PHP auto figures everything out. There are different concepts of different types in PHP though, so there are ints and booleans and strings and so on. But and you can check to see whether something is a particular type, but the variable itself doesn't need to contain a particular type of value. Auto converts a lot. You can cast with int, so if you do in brackets int this string, that'll be cast to a number, so the thing inside of here will be a number instead of a string. Comments. 3 comment syntaxes in PHP. We've got the normal Java ones, the single line // and the multi-line /*/. We have this additional one here, the hash. That's a common one in like shell scripting and stuff, and like Perl. And, Marty really likes to use the hash in PHP. I figure why retrain your muscle memory? Just use the double slash like everybody else. So this is what I'll be using. For loop. For loop is exactly the same as in Java. The only difference, you declare the first thing is the initializing, then we have the conditions, and then we have the increment or decrement. The only major difference, and something that's a point of confusion for many students, so just a common mistake, is that you want to say like int $i equals 0 or something. That'll be a syntax error. In fact, why don't we do that real quick? Okay, what's wrong with what I've just done? It's not in a PHP block, so I have to put this in a PHP block. Okay. Okay, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, so on. Again, notice that if we view the source, because we output a new line at the end of each thing, in the source code they appear on different lines, but in the PHP it's all put together on the same line. How would we put them on different lines when we actually view it in the browser? What's that? Yeah, we'd have to actually output BR tags instead of just a new line here. So let's add a BR tag here. So we have a BR and a new line, so we'll have a line with a BR at the end, and then in the source code we'll go to a new line. This will make us go to a new line in the HTML, this will make us go to a new line in the source. Okay. Let's just make a mistake real quick. If I say int $i equals 0, mistake. Parse error expecting semicolon, blah, blah, blah. That's not a very helpful error. So you probably run into that a few times. Okay, so now we've added a BR tag and everything is going on to new lines. Look at the source, BR, new line. Excellent. If-else statements, exactly as in Java. This is a condition that evaluates to true or false. Else if works exactly the same. It's just the same as in Java. So is the while loop, exactly the same. And the do while loop, break and continue also behave as they do in Java. Int and float types, you can convert between ints and floats. You can round to certain values. 7 divided by 2 in it automatically becomes a float. String type, I can declare this $favorite food equals Ethiopian. I can also use the square bracket notation as with arrays if I want to get the tooth index of this string. So the 0th, the 1th, and the tooth would be H. again, 5 plus quote something with an int in it, automatically, PHP automatically tries to convert this to a string. So 2 turtle doves, it will interpret as a 2, and but if we use a dot, this results in concatenating, converting this 5 to a string, and then concatenating it to the string. So that'll produce 52 turtle doves. Yeah. On the very next slide, there's a good illustration of this. So there's something called string interpolation in PHP. This allows you to inject a variable directly into a string. So instead of having to go back and forth with concatenating various values together, you can just actually put the age variable directly inside of there, and it'll just inject the value from that in there. This is one of the reasons why all variables in PHP have a $sign, because when you have a string, it just looks for a $sign, it looks for a variable name after that, and it injects the value. Inside of double quotes, values are interpolated, so it will inject the value for age in here. However, inside double quotes, inside single quotes, they're not. So inside single quotes here, it'll actually just literally output $age. Okay, so this will output you're 16 years old. This will output $age. That's a very useful feature. If you need to disambiguate, you can wrap the string variable name in curly braces. Otherwise, it'll look for a variable called ageeth, which in this example doesn't exist. String functions, you can get the length of the string. You can find a position of a character in a string. You can find a substring of a string. You can convert it all to uppercase. There are several useful, you can trim any white space from the beginning and ends of it. Several useful string manipulation functions in PHP. Boolean types are interesting in PHP. In Java, there is an explicit separate Boolean type, and you can only create a Boolean if you use mathematical operators and stuff. In PHP, it's a lot looser. There's the concept of truthiness and falsiness. You can explicitly have a Boolean, or you can cast to a Boolean, but you can also just sort of say, you can also just use any random positive number will evaluate to true. So if you have if you just say if student count, student count is 217, so that will evaluate to true. Anything that, so basically anything that's truthy is anything that's not falsy. And the things that are falsy are the int 0, the float 0.0, empty string, the 0 string, which is interesting, and then null, and arrays with 0 elements, which is also interesting. So all of those are falsy. Anything else will evaluate to true. So if you just put anything with a truthy value in the condition, it'll evaluate to true. Math operators, bunch of different math operators here. Trig functions, constants. Some of the useful ones are rounding, so floor, ceiling, round, and then also a random number function, rand. So those are, and then max and min. They're all useful at some point. There's the concept of null. You can check to see whether a value is null using the function isSet. We'll come back to that later. So the idea is that PHP lives inside of HTML code. So anything outside of a PHP block is interpreted automatically by the browser as HTML. So if we output characters that are HTML stuff, then the browser will interpret them that way. So we could do something like this if we wanted to. We could print all these HTML characters. Bracket HTML, bracket new line, space, bracket head, bracket new line, and so on. We could actually literally print out HTML code, but there's not really much purpose to that, considering that outside of PHP blocks, it's just HTML code anyhow. So really what we should be doing here is just, if we go back to our document here, I can just add an HTML template here, and I can move all this stuff down into the body, and we're good. This is now an HTML document, a full HTML document. It won't look any different on screen except for the fact that we'll see this, the hello world up here, the title. It's not going to look any different. But now in the source, in the browser source, we see the full HTML document. We can also generate HTML. Okay, so a really useful way of injecting values into the page. Actually, no, we don't have much time here, so I'm going to move on to the example and do a little bit more with the example. I want to add some PHP to this, this beer code here. We have a lot of redundant stuff on this page. And so I want to add some stuff. In particular, we've got some redundancy down here. So I want to write, this is all explicitly written out in the HTML code here, like line for line in the HTML code. So I want to eliminate that redundancy. Well, actually, so that's in the browser source. I should have shown you here. It's in the original source of the file, in this HTML file. I want to turn this into a PHP script and eliminate that redundancy. Use a program to generate that output instead of just copying and pasting and changing the line every time. So I'm just going to delete all of this, and I'm going to start with this line as my sort of template. Let's move this over a little bit. And so I'm going to use some PHP code to generate dynamically a list of these paragraphs. So how would I go about doing this multiple times? For loop. Go into the PHP block. For $i equals 0, $i less than, actually I want to start with 99. $i greater than or equal to 1. Did we go down to 1 or down to, yeah, go down to 1. And then $i minus minus to decrement. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, instead of printing stuff in here, so there's a couple of different things that I could do. I could just say like print quote all this stuff. Add a new line there just so that it looks nice in the source code. I could print all of this and I could say $i, $i. Here, I'm going to have a little bit of trouble here. I'm going to have to actually go out of this string and concatenate in $i minus 1. Okay, so this is one possible way of doing this. If we go back and refresh the page, so this is beer.html. I renamed it to .php, so I'm going to rename that. Okay. Now we have all of them, and I can prove it to you that this is actually being executed by adjusting the number here. I can say 50 instead of 99, and it will start with 50. 50. So the PHP interpreter on the server is executing this code. That HTML code is being generated and sent to the browser. So all of these lines of PHP code are being generated and sent. Yeah.
Because PHP can print, then can you receive it as a print output?
Well, that's basically what we're doing here, is we're sending this text as output to the browser. So the output of this script is captured and sent directly to the browser. Mm-hmm.
You get it from the user. Can you receive user input?
Can you receive user input? No, you cannot receive user input, although there is a way that you can communicate back and forth between the client and the server. Okay, yes, so you can actually sort of receive user input. It's a little bit more complicated, but that's something that we will get into in a couple of weeks. Okay, so this is one thing that we could do. I want to make this a little bit nicer though. I don't want to be printing all this HTML here because it's possible that this paragraph here is pretty simple HTML. We don't have any attributes, but maybe what if I wanted to add, a class to this or something? Class equals foo. All of a sudden I have to escape these characters here, and that's kind of a pain. And what if I had like a style attribute here, which is bad style itself, but that's if I had a bunch of stuff in here, this can get really long, and I don't want to be printing all of this stuff. It just starts to look ugly. So the alternative, the better alternative, is to exit PHP mode. So I'm exiting PHP mode there. I am re-entering PHP mode, and then here, so this is interpreted as just HTML code, right? If we just do this, so I have a $i there, if we just do that, what'll happen? It'll just say $i. For $i bottles of beer on the wall, $i bottles of beer. It's not interpreting that $i as PHP. So one thing that we can do to inject a little value into an HTML document is we can use something called an expression block. Expression block uses this syntax, and basically what it means is just inject this value here. So it's like a PHP block, but it's got this equal sign at the front. So I'm going to wrap this in an expression block. So angle bracket question mark equals $i question mark angle bracket. I'm going to do that for every time that I inject this I value. $i minus 1, and I want to get rid of this string concatenating stuff because that was PHP code, and this is no longer PHP, that's HTML. Okay, excellent, we're back. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. We're going to do some more with that example on Monday. For now, what I want to do is I want to show you an example of what we're going to be talking about in the extra session today. We're going to have an extra session probably about 5 or 10 minutes after class, just right here. You can just stick around and hang out. We're going to talk today about, let's go to the extra sessions page. We're going to talk about 3 different topics: typography, web typography, interesting things about how to adjust like line height and do like really elegant typographic things on the web, how to embed like web fonts and things like that. Some useful information about that. We'll talk about CSS3 transitions and transforms. Transitions allow you to move things around on the page and do kind of like cool whiz-bang things with those. So we'll talk about those, and then the last thing we're going to talk about, I'll sort of illustrate, and this comes back to a question that's been coming up. Why don't we use tables for layout? Why don't we use absolute positioning very much? And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you an example of a page that sort of illustrates why we don't do this. I think if I go to most really good websites now do this. So Firefox is not the only one. But if I look at this page with my screen at this size, it looks like this. But if I start adjusting the screen, you notice that it's sort of between there and there, the size of these links here in the middle adjusts a little bit, just a little bit, but it adjusts enough so that it still looks good. And then you get a little bit smaller right there. Oh, everything all of a sudden changed completely. And then you get a little bit smaller. Actually, it only goes down to there, but the rest of the stuff on the page, let's look at the rest of the stuff on the page, like these links down here, I bet you they change a lot after we go down here. So that image goes away completely, and then now all of a sudden these are stacked one on top of each other. Let's go look at one more thing here. There's another page here, I think it might be about, another page that exemplifies this. Basically, what we're doing here is we're modifying the CSS so that things become stacked a little bit more elegantly if the screen size doesn't allow them to all fit on the same page. And this is what's called responsive web design. It allows you to adjust the appearance of the page depending on the size of screen that is being viewed. So if we had, for example, if we had laid these out all in tables, then we're explicitly saying that these have to be next to each other and you can't stack them one on top of another. But we, for these things in particular, it would be fine if we stacked them. Anyhow, so that's the third thing that we're going to talk about in the extra session. I'll give you guys a break, and then anyone who'd like to stick around for the extra session, we'll start that in 5 or 6 minutes or so.